February 1944. German cities are burning. The Eastern Front is collapsing backwards toward Poland. And in a house in the Bavarian Alps, a mother of 9 sits down with a pen and writes to her husband about the future of German marriage. Her proposal is this: that the state should legalize a form of wartime polygamy, that every man of sufficient racial value should be entitled to more than one wife, that those women should bear children in rotation, year after year, to replace the men the war was consuming, and that the word adultery should be deleted from the German language entirely. The woman writing that letter was not a fanatic on the fringe of the movement. She was the wife of the second most powerful man in Nazi Germany. She had known Adolf Hitler since she was a child. Hitler had signed her marriage certificate as a witness and stood as godfather to her firstborn son. She was also writing that letter because her husband was sleeping with an actress in Munich, and she had decided the correct response was not to stop him, but to schedule him. If you want the stories from inside the Nazi elite that the documentaries skip, subscribe and turn on the bell. That is the whole ask. To understand how a woman arrives at that sentence, you have to go back 15 years, to a dinner table in Constance, and to the man who taught her that some people are not people at all. She was born Gerda Buch on the 23rd of October 1909 in Constance, on the western shore of Lake Constance, eldest of 4 children. Her father, Walter Buch, was a career army officer who fought through the First World War and came home refusing to accept that Germany had lost it. By the end of 1922, he had joined the Nazi Party as one of its earliest members. In 1927, he was made chairman of the party's internal court, the body that judged loyalty, discipline, and ideological purity inside the movement. Buch was also a personal friend of Adolf Hitler, who came to the house through the 1920s. Gerda grew up watching the future dictator eat at her family's table. Her father did not soften his language for the children. He was known for statements reducing Jews below the level of human beings, that they were not people, but rot. To Gerda, that was not politics. It was the temperature of the room. She absorbed it before she was old enough to test it against anything else. She trained as a kindergarten teacher. She was being raised, without anyone saying so, to be the wife of a man in the movement. At 19, she met him. And when her father ran the background check that any father would run, what came back should have ended it, because the man asking for his daughter had already been to prison for his part in a killing. Martin Bormann was 9 years older, a party organizer with a reputation for ambition and a short temper. In 1923, he had been involved in the murder of a school teacher named Walter Cato, killed by a Freikorps group that suspected him of informing. Bormann was convicted as an accomplice and served about a year. Walter Buch hesitated. Then he gave his consent anyway. On the 2nd of September 1929, Gerda Buch married Martin Bormann. The 2 men who signed as witnesses were Adolf Hitler and Rudolf Hess. That marriage was not a private arrangement. It wired Bormann directly into a family already sitting at the top of the movement and gave him a standing invitation into rooms he had spent years trying to enter. He knew exactly what he had married. By 1933, the year Hitler took power, Bormann was chief of staff to Deputy Führer Rudolf Hess. That October, he was raised to Reichsleiter, the second highest rank in the party structure. Gerda celebrated every step, and she paid for that climb in a currency the regime valued above any other. Over the next 13 years, she would be pregnant 10 times, and one of those children would die because of a decision her husband made about milk. The first arrived on the 14th of April 1930. They named him Martin Adolf, after his godfather, Adolf Hitler. The pattern held. One son was Heinrich Hugo, for his godfather Heinrich Himmler. Another was Rudolf Gerhard, for Rudolf Hess. A twin daughter, Erengard, died shortly after birth of bovine tuberculosis. The household drank unpasteurized milk because Martin Bormann had decided raw milk was healthier for them. Then in May 1941, Rudolf Hess flew to Scotland and became a non-person overnight. The children carrying his name and his wife's name were simply renamed. Rudolf Gerhard became Helmut. Another became Eike. In that house, a child's name was a political asset, and it could be withdrawn without discussion. The 10th child, Volker, was born in September 1943. For bearing more than 8 children, Gerda received the Cross of Honor of the German Mother in gold, the top grade of a medal the state handed out for reproduction. The regime had reduced German women to a biological function, and she wore the reduction as an achievement. From the outside, the photographs show a model National Socialist family on a mountainside. What the photographs do not show is that her husband had turned that mountain into something no camera was allowed to record properly, and that he had emptied it of the people who lived there first. The family lived on the Obersalzberg, in the Bavarian Alps, and Martin Bormann had built the place. From 1935, he bought up the surrounding farmland, pressuring out families who had held it for generations, until the compound covered roughly 10 square kilometers, close to 4 square miles. He ordered the roads, the barracks, the guest houses, the tunnel system, and the mountaintop tea house the world came to know as the Eagle's Nest. He placed his own house within sight of the Berghof, Hitler's Alpine residence. While Europe was being occupied and emptied, the Obersalzberg operated like a private resort. Alpine gardens, afternoon coffee, film screenings in the evening. The wives of the Nazi leadership passed their days in it, while their husbands ran conquest and mass killing from the same hillside. Gerda's children played inside that compound, in walking distance of the men signing the orders. Guests who visited that house came away with one memory that outlasted all the scenery. It was a sound. Visitors to the Obersalzberg recorded that Martin Bormann summoned his wife by whistling for her. Short, sharp, from inside the house, the way a man calls an animal in from a yard. She came. The domestic reality behind the official photographs was coarse and controlling. He drank. He lost his temper over small household matters. Accounts from inside the family circle describe violence against the children. One has him beating 2 of them with a whip because they were frightened of a large dog. Another has him kicking a child for falling into a puddle. Some accounts extend that violence to Gerda. In public, he humiliated her in front of guests who found it uncomfortable to witness. He was also conducting a long affair with the actress Manja Behrens, and during the war years, he spent more time with her than with his own family. Gerda knew. He told her himself, in writing. Her reply is the reason anyone still studies this marriage, because she did not accuse him, and she did not grieve. She did arithmetic. She proposed a rotation. Behrens would bear a child 1 year, and she the next, so that her husband would always have a wife available to him. She was not defending a marriage, she was defending a birth rate. That was the private version. The February 1944 letter was the policy version. Polygamy as national emergency law. Adultery deleted from the language. On this question, she had moved past most of the men in the leadership. The same correspondence runs thick with anti-Semitic hatred. She wrote about Jews with a venom matching anything her husband put on paper. She admired Julius Streicher, publisher of Der Stürmer, and one of the loudest anti-Semitic voices in the entire regime. She raised the children in a house that had discarded Christianity as incompatible with National Socialism. The eldest were baptized as a formality, the first with Hitler standing as godfather, and the younger ones were not baptized at all. Her son Martin Adolf later described that home directly. Racial doctrine at the center of everything, compassion treated as a defect, and children taught from the start that they were the biological elite of a new order. And every promotion she celebrated in those letters, every rank her husband climbed, was moving him closer to a set of documents that would put his signature on the machinery of the Holocaust. Bormann was involved in anti-Jewish measures from the regime's early years. After Hess flew to Scotland on the 10th of May 1941, Bormann took over the party chancellery and answered to Hitler alone. On the 31st of May 1941, he signed the decree extending the Nuremberg race laws into the annexed Eastern territories. After the invasion of the Soviet Union that June, reports from the Einsatzgruppen, the SS mobile killing squads operating behind the front, moved into the party apparatus as those units shot hundreds of thousands of Jews through the summer and autumn. The administrative and legal questions arising from the Wannsee Conference of January 1942, where the final solution was coordinated between agencies, ran through the party chancellery as well. On the 12th of April 1943, Hitler appointed him personal secretary to the Führer, effective control over domestic affairs in Germany, and control over who was permitted to speak to Hitler at all. Gerda understood what her husband did. She recorded her approval of it in her own handwriting. She had spent 16 years at the center of that system. She had 2 years left, and the first thing the war took from her was the mountain. On the 25th of April 1945, British and American bombers hit the Obersalzberg and destroyed most of the compound her husband had spent a decade building. Gerda left the same day with the children, south over the border into Italy, to the village of Wolkenstein in South Tyrol. Martin Bormann stayed in Berlin, in the bunker, to the end. He witnessed Hitler's marriage to Eva Braun. He was present when Hitler killed himself on the 30th of April. He left the bunker on the 1st of May and died within hours trying to get through Soviet lines in the city. His fate stayed officially unresolved for decades. Nuremberg tried him in absentia and sentenced him to death, a court-passing sentence on a man who was already dead. Remains found in Berlin in 1972 were confirmed as his by DNA testing in 1998. Gerda never learned any of that. Allied troops found her in Wolkenstein within months, and by then, something else had already started killing her. She was arrested and interrogated over days in prison, held without visitors, not permitted to write letters. 35 years old, widow of a man the world was hunting, 9 surviving children, and nothing left to shield them with. In the autumn of 1945, she was moved to a hospital in Merano, in northern Italy. Doctors diagnosed uterine cancer. She died on the 23rd of March 1946. Accounts of her death record that the cancer did not kill her directly, that she died of mercury poisoning caused by the treatment itself. She was buried in the German military cemetery at Merano, plot 610, sharing a grave with a German soldier named Horst Brugger. A woman who had spent her adult life inside the highest circle in Germany ended in a shared grave under a number. Her father, Walter Buch, was classified in denazification proceedings as a main offender. He killed himself on the 12th of November 1949. The children she had carried into Italy were placed with a clergyman, Theodor Schmitz, who later adopted them. Martin Adolf, the boy named for Hitler, with Hitler as his godfather, was ordained a Catholic priest in 1959, worked as a missionary in Africa, and spent the rest of his life speaking publicly about what his parents had believed and done. He lectured on the Holocaust. He met survivors. His own record did not stay clean. In 2011, a former pupil at an Austrian Catholic boarding school accused him of rape, alleging it happened when the boy was 12, and Bormann was working there as a priest and schoolmaster in the early 1960s. Other former pupils alleged serious physical abuse at the school. Gerda Bormann never stood trial. She never explained herself in public. What she left is the correspondence, and the correspondence does not leave much room for sympathy. She was not a bystander swept along by powerful men. She took the ideology of the regime into the most private corners of her life, into her marriage, into the naming of her children, into her own arithmetic of how many births a household could produce, and defended it there when nobody was making her. The killing needed administrators, and paperwork, and men willing to sign. It also needed houses where none of it sounded strange over dinner. She built one of those houses. She was 36 when she died in an Italian hospital bed, a whistle away from everything she had believed in. If this one held you, subscribe and hit the bell. Every video here is built the same way, from the record, with nothing invented. Drop the name in the comments of who you want covered next from inside that circle.